Welcome to the Flychain Reaction, a podcast designed to empower healthcare providers like you to master the business side of running a practice. Each episode sparks a chain reaction where actionable insights on financial management, operational efficiency, and growth strategies build upon each other, creating a powerful ripple effect to help your organization thrive. With Flychain's financial expertise and insights from industry leaders, we'll dive into everything you need to ignite success. Join us and let the Flychain Reaction spark growth in your healthcare business. Hello and welcome back to the Flychain Reaction. I'm Simone Deverell, Head of Growth here at Flychain, and I'll be your host for today's discussion. Today's episode brings together two visionary leaders. We have Ethan Schwartzbach, CEO and co-founder of Flychain, and Nate Mainge, CEO and co-founder of Therapy IQ. We're tackling the challenges healthcare providers face when transitioning EMR, RCM, or practice management systems. So today we'll be sharing strategies and highlight how Therapy IQ and Flychain solutions can work together. We'll be introducing a transition financing program and really with the goal of helping to ease cash flow concerns. So let's get started. I'd love to turn it over to Ethan and Nate to introduce yourselves and your companies. So maybe Nate, would love for you to start.
Yeah, so I'm Nate, co-founder, CEO of Therapy IQ. Therapy IQ is a practice management platform that eliminates the need for the other 7 to 9 different point solutions that providers usually need to subscribe to in order to manage and run their practice. And the reason they usually need to do that is because most of the traditional EHR products out there usually see these practices as a clinical operation and not a full business. At Therapy IQ, we take a different stance with this, and we think that this is a full business, and a business owner needs full visibility through the entire workflows, the entire processes from clinical, financial, and operational, and also be able to also maintain compliance fairly easily, because that is the core of their business. They're seeing, human beings. They're trying to help human beings, and not only is compliance important to them, profitability is also important to them. So we take care of that so that they don't have to worry about that.
Wonderful, very comprehensive. Ethan, maybe. Do you want to introduce Flychain quickly? I know it's a Flychain reaction, so our listeners know what Flychain is. But
most people should know, but really quickly, we're Flychain. I'm Ethan, co-founder and CEO here, and thanks, Nate, for joining us. We've built what we call the financial toolkit, the financial operating system, if you will, for small to medium-sized healthcare businesses. And we're really focused specifically on the healthcare universe. We lend to our customers, and we'll talk a little bit about that and help bridge cash flows in periods of delay from insurance, transitioning, where we will see these things, seasonality comes about. That's where we actually got our origin, is lending and wanting to create a very fairly priced working capital solution to folks that are usually not able to get the bank financing. And then that led us down this path to build our full financial platform, which now includes accounting and bookkeeping specific to healthcare, where we're doing insurance claim reconciliation, multi-location. We then can do things like valuations, and we built like Rocket Money for your business now that we have this reliable financial data. And we're really excited to talk with Nate today because we kind of view these worlds as, well, they're fundamentally different companies. One is much more kind of clinical and operational, where that more financial and operational, they're actually kind of like very related, right? They're almost two sides of the same coin. And so we're going to dig into that today and talk about how the marriage of our kind of two solutions really does benefit this universe and takes a lot of work off of our customers' plates so they can spend more time running their business, seeing patients, doing what they got into this business to do in the first place.
Exactly.
Wonderful.
Love it.
Great. I think let's jump right into the discussion. I think, Nate, would be great if you can start this one off. We want to understand, why are transitions like switching an EMR, RCM, or practice management system, why are they often compared to as an organ transplant?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. I love the analogy as well of an organ transplant. I mean, change in itself for any human being is hard, no matter what you're changing, right? But when it comes to a change that you're making on behalf of your business, especially a change as far as the software that you're using to run your business, that is as important as any organ in your body. And when you think about it, you need this piece of software in order to operate the rest of your business. Even if it's just one piece of software, even if it's just your bookkeeping software, even if it's not your not even your EHR. Think about anything that you use in your platform in your business. The moment you want to replace that, now you have to think about quite a lot of things. There's data involved that was in this platform that you need to move over. There's workflows. There's that learned muscle memory that you're used to doing certain things a certain way because you're used to this software. And so when you decide to make that change, it's a big deal. And just like the software is, the organs in your body are essential to the survival and functioning of the body. These systems are also essential to the day-to-day running of your practice. They manage critical tasks like managing patient records, billing, scheduling, and these are important because you're actually dealing with human beings' lives, right? So you're not just running any other business like any other business. This is a very special type of business. So replacing these systems requires, a seamless transition to avoid, disrupting your workflows internally, with your teams and also your customers as well. Failure in transitioning a new system can lead to, revenue loss, compliance issues, and even patient care disruptions. So beginning the evaluation early is important. And again, this is actually the point I want to make really, really clear, because just like an organ transplant, I mean, most of the time you get an organ transplant because it's last minute, it's an emergency, and you need to live and you need to do it. That's as opposed to an organ transplant. When you're switching your software, you don't want to be in that spot. You don't want to be in a spot where you have to do it. That's an emergency at that point, and it's almost too late to start investigating. And then you're probably likely to make an emotional decision or a bad decision. So what you want to do is you want to begin evaluating replacements 6 to 12 months before your either contract expires or before your desired go live date. So you might think, I want to start, I want to start using an EMR in the summer. The best time to look is today. You need to be starting, immediately. So how do you do this? You participate in demos, with other products, uncover inefficiencies in your current system because you don't know what you don't know until you start looking, and then also you're going to discover new technologies. Like, have things changed since you last looked? Because the world is moving. Your peers are moving into systems that are more robust, and they're getting more value, and they're shrinking their overall payroll expenses because there's systems now that are more efficient out in the world today that are not requiring too much manual workflow. But you don't know that unless you start looking. And so before, rather than waiting until things are tight and it's an emergency, you want to start looking as early as possible. So that, in a nutshell, is how I think about migrations. And just to give you guys a quick overview. I'm a CEO of a tech company, and it might sound like I'm talking about switching to my tech, but before I was, in my previous life, I was actually a consultant for providers in private practice. And, for over 10 years, Amy, my co-founder, and I, that's what we did for over 10 years. And it's how we discovered the gaps with the traditional EMRs. But we also have, experienced moving hundreds of practices from one system to another, from one platform to another, even websites from one host to another. So we have plenty of experience with this, and we've seen this is not something you want to rush as an emergency. So,
yeah. No, I think that's so fair. This is not something that you do last minute. This really takes a lot of planning. And I think what would be interesting also for Ethan, maybe you can speak a little bit to like the financial or cash flow implications during that system change.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen this firsthand time and time again across our customer base. And when we think about switching, EMR, practice management, billing, even payroll to a certain extent, like it often causes breaks in the action, as we like to say. So we're using that like EMR billing as an example. When we see switches occur, it takes a while for that new system, to get people retrained on it, et cetera, but also the migration and getting all of the things that you were doing historically there and transferring that over here. And now you're going to have new kind of people maybe you're working with, new processes in place, and that can cause issues. Even the best billers, the best practice management softwares, like there's always problems. We know this. Healthcare is kind of broken. And so, you have to understand and bake that in. And so we'll often see cash flow issues arise in this transition kind of in a few ways. Like the first would just be, delayed reimbursements and billing interruptions. That's the kind of stuff that maybe using a new platform as you're getting used to it might cause a little like friction day one. But working with the right partner, we're going to talk about how to kind of put yourself in the best position for success there, so you don't have those cash flow issues, and you're working with partners and looking out for things that are going to make that decision easier and transition process easier. I'd also say there's just this notion of like accounts receivable that all of our customers generally have in the form of those outstanding claims. And kind of two things can happen there. So there's this notion of making the switch, right? And you're going to be switching from a system that was doing billing, and they're kind of responsible for that like outstanding AR. And so when you're making that transition, it's really important to know like who's going to tackle that outstanding AR. Is it going to be them? And then, you're now going to be taking over with a clean slate, or are you going to transition that AR? And what's the process of transitioning that kind of outstanding claim that was submitted through this system, but now needs to be like reimbursed through this one? So that is all generally thought through. And we see on average, I would say like anywhere between 4 and 6 to 8 weeks and be like the whole transition process beginning to end, sometimes shorter, sometimes longer. But just know that it will take some time as it relates to getting these new things stood up. So Flychain just really quickly will help and kind of help finance those cash flow gaps, because we'll have a line of sight into that outstanding AR. So we see it all the time. And by partnering with the right folks that can do a really good job in that transition, like Therapy IQ, we see less cash flow issues. Granted, we're there to help, but it minimizes the window, and it minimizes the amount of potentially uncollected claims.
Yeah, and actually, just to piggyback on that, just a quick comment on that point as well. In that scenario also applies whether you have an in-house biller or you have a third-party biller. They're using some kind of system to run your AR. So they're running your payments through some kind of system. So whether they're responsible for managing that process, it's something that you as a provider, you need as a practice owner, you need to be clear on. What's outstanding, first of all? Where do we draw the line? And then how are we going to collect that money? Because it's money that you served. It's definitely money that's owed to you, and you cannot leave that money, you just let it disappear. So definitely a great point there, Ethan.
Awesome.
Yeah, no, and we'll definitely get into that also later and talking about that transition financing. We have some exciting news for you there also. But just to dive into really the heart of this discussion, and I think, Nate, you would be the most qualified person to be answering this question. But what are the key questions that practice owners should ask a prospective practice management provider before deciding to switch?
100%. That's a fantastic question. So, like I mentioned in my previous answer, have over 10 years of experience migrating practices from one platform to another, or just different technologies to a new technology. And I usually break this into 3 categories. So I'm going to go through them in my own. I'm going to tie them to our analogy of the organ transplant, and hopefully it'll all make sense. But the first thing you want to make sure about anything that any platform, any resource, any vendor that you're trying to use to integrate as a partner into your practice. One is current and future business compatibility. So just like like an organ, the new system must be compatible with the body being the existing infrastructure and your processes in your practice today. So you shouldn't have to make a massive change in your workflow just because you're switching systems. So is it compatible with where you are today? And migration, just like tissue compatibility in transplants, also must be handled with precision to ensure a seamless transition. So in 2025, what questions do you need to ask a vendor, right? So here's some examples. One, does a system support efficient group charting, group scheduling, and group billing, right? Because if you're going to scale your services, you want to be able to offer group services as well. Does the system have integrated telehealth and e-prescribing? To be honest with you, if in 2025 they don't have that, just walk away. Does it have integrated lead management and waitlist functionality? Every single provider we're talking to today has a waitlist. How do you manage your leads? You're capturing your leads from your website. How are you managing those leads all the way into the EMR? Does the EMR think about that, or are they not even considering that yet? Another question you want to ask is, Do they have modern patient engagement tools? Because you want to engage your patients, you want to make sure people are feeling like they're being seen and being heard. Do they have automated patient appointment reminders? Patient appointment reminders in this day and age, if they don't have it, just walk away. Do they have a patient portal and a check-in kiosk? You want to automate as much of your practice as possible. You have someone at the front desk who's already overwhelmed with the work that they're doing. Everybody in your practice is overwhelmed. So, where you can use technology you can leverage technology to simplify those workflows. You want to do that. So a patient portal is a simple way to do that. So you can actually have a portal where your patients can actually, you can communicate with your patients. You can also help, serve them through the treatment process. The check-in kiosk is obviously a no-brainer. You want to be able to have people. There's an iPad at the front desk. People can come in and self-serve and check in, and the therapist in the back room is notified to say, hey, your patient is here. Those are simple things that actually make your lives easier as you're operating a business. And this goes beyond now clinical documentation and scheduling, which is what most traditional EMRs have. Now, the other set of questions you want to ask is billing capabilities for the new system. Does it automatically run eligibility or verification? Sorry, does it run eligibility checks to verify benefits for your clients on day one? Like when you're migrating from one system to another, you already have eligibility figured out on the previous system, or maybe you have a process, maybe you call in or whatever. But when you're moving on to a new system, is this system going to help you verify the thousands of clients you have on day one, so that when you're starting to make appointments, you already know what's coming up? Does the system have the ability to seamlessly bill secondary insurance? This is a huge feature that helps practices avoid leaving money on the table. Does the system have an auto pay feature that you can enroll your clients in? So auto pay is where you can run automatic payments so that you don't have to manually click and bill and charge your clients. If you don't want to do the automatic payments, does the system have the ability to offer batch payment processing for those who are not enrolled in auto pay? Because some clients might not want that. And then scheduling capabilities. You want to find out, do they have multi-time zone support? We're finding a lot of practices now that are spread out across multiple states. But you also, most traditional EMRs out there, they can't manage multiple time zones. So you want to be able to manage your entire practice in one instance. You don't have to have an instance for Chicago and have another instance for California, because your practice is spread out across multiple time zones. And then as far as scheduling as well, you want to find out resource availability search. So can we enter can the provider enter criteria that can find all the availability that can work for your client? So this goes into like self-scheduling for the client. Can we find a way to quickly schedule this client and show all the availability fairly quickly and fairly easily, so that we're not spending time on a call with a client for 30 minutes trying to figure out how we're scheduling the next appointment. Payroll capabilities. Payroll actually. This point I really want to stress on this point. This is how you can actually tell if a platform views you as a business or just a clinic. If they're thinking about how you pay your employees, do they track how? Do they understand how your payroll works? Are they tracking the KPIs that matter to you so you can pay your clients, your employees? Some practices use a fee-for-service option where they pay their providers based on the service that they provide. Does the EMR even have a way of tracking that KPI? Are they making managing your team easier for you or more difficult? Because your provider, you also have your own caseload as a practice owner. You also have your own caseload. So, and then you're managing a team as well. Does the technology you're going to be using in 2025 help you manage that? Does it make it easier or more difficult? If not, this shows a lack of understanding that your job as a healthcare entrepreneur doesn't end when the session ends, right? So your job as a healthcare entrepreneur is nonstop. Do these guys understand that? So yeah. Ethan, any comments on any of that?
Yeah. Just two questions that are a little less, I would say, like tactical. Like everything that you said there is it's just the truth, for lack of a better term. It's you need to be asking those questions. You mentioned things that are table stakes that we agree with, right? Like they need to have that. Otherwise, they're not a legitimate, partner for you, in our opinion. But two questions we always like to kind of say. First, one is ask your team. So I think it's really important because they're going to be the ones in that all day, every day. And you want to get buy-in. You want to get buy-in from your team. Have them meet. Have them do demos. I know we're going to talk about support down the line, but What does that mean from me being a clinician who's super busy, and the last thing I necessarily want to do is like retrain how to do everything? Have them buy into this. And so it's a group decision, because sometimes maybe the owner makes that decision, doesn't really get permission, and it causes friction and unhappiness and maybe even attrition. So that's the first, like, buy-in from an org and the people that are going to be using it. The second is, as you're making these decisions, ask that platform for references. And I always say this, but when I say ask them for references, I would also take it a step further. And don't just ask them for references, because as we know, you're going to get the best people that are going to be evangelists. Obviously, like go and try and find their customers and reach out to those customers that aren't the ones that they've listed, because you're going to get a very, very candid answer. And I think doing that a few times just to check boxes and do further diligence is really important, because you're going to be sold something and they're going to say it's great, blah, 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 but they're going to probably sugarcoat or cover up some of the bigger issues that, their actual clients might be experiencing, and see a mixed bag there. Sometimes they have it all, and sometimes it's really leaves something to be desired, or it's an inch deep, mile wide, and for multiple industries, and therefore it's not going to be as specific for a therapy business, for example.
Exactly, and that's how you uncover those things that you wish you knew after the fact.
Exactly right. And then if it doesn't work, yes, start the process all over again, and then it's you use the term organ transplant.
Yeah, exactly. It's that important, right?
Yeah, and Nate, I have a question also. I mean, everything that you mentioned here, it's incredibly comprehensive, right? You have telehealth, you have billing capabilities, schedule, payroll capabilities, just to set expectation. And I think even just like out of interest, is this something that most practice management systems to date offer as a comprehensive solution, or is what Therapy IQ is offering, is that very unique to your company? And you guys being one of the most comprehensive practice management systems out there, just to set expectations for, when these providers go and ask these questions, if most of the time it's just going to be, no, we don't have that yet. No, we have a partnership with this person who does that, or we have a partnership with that person who does that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. So when I was a consultant, and before we built Therapy IQ, even for our own practice, we were looking to solve certain problems. And the biggest problem we found, no matter what system you use, if you're not able to completely have full transparency and visibility to all the workflows in your business, those siloed workflows are basically going to kill your business eventually. You can't scale with those siloed workflows. So to answer your question, no, there's not a platform that we have found that can give you full visibility on the entire business, clinical, financial, operational, and also keep you compliant. We haven't found that, and it's why we are growing as fast as we are. We are seeing quite dozens of providers, of practices moving to us every month. Is because they can see that this is a platform that was built by people who understand what they deal with on a daily basis. And it's also why we don't write one line of code without speaking to our customers. We don't, because we don't think we know more than they do. We think they're the boots on the ground, they're the feet to the fire, they're the ones who know more than we do. So we collect ideas before we ever build anything. And everything we built in Therapy IQ is an idea that's come from the providers, not just us. In a nutshell, that's the biggest gap, is siloed workflows. If you use a traditional EHR, you're going to end up with 7 to 9 different point solutions. And so you have to make a decision if that's what you want for your business.
Yeah, no, because I was thinking it's incredible that you were able to put all of this into one comprehensive solution. And from our time, talking to partners and other options out there, this just seems incredibly comprehensive. So yeah, it's very impressive. Thank you.
I mean, obviously it took quite a bit of work.
I can imagine.
That's the only way we felt. That's the only way to do it. It really is. I think if any other provider had the talent and the skills and the knowledge that we had from the tech standpoint, we'd have ended up with the same type of product because they get it. Yeah.
I think so. Earlier you mentioned there are 3 key points to look out for. You said first, current and future business compatibility. And then you mentioned there are 2 others.
Yes, correct. So
Would
yeah,
love to
let's.
hear the other two.
Yeah, great question. So the second point that I always like to make, even when I was, working with my own consulting clients, is this team's expertise and planning, right? So these guys, the vendor you're going to has got to know more than you do. I mean, if you think about it, with an organ transplant, you need a team of specialists with meticulous planning because they should know more than you do because they're here to help you out, right? So switching systems demands experts in implementation and training and troubleshooting to ensure a smooth transition with minimal disruption. And they also have to understand your practice the way it is today, because they have to be able to move you from where you are to where the promised land, where you're trying to go, right? So they need to tell you stuff like, what's the migration timeline? Can they outline a detailed day-to-day process so you know what to expect, right? Will there be overlap periods where I'm running two different systems in order to ensure continuity for my clients? If that's the case, if I'm going to have to run two different systems, how much will that cost? Are we planning ahead for that? And then third is, okay, if there's a cost, is there any assistance available from your new vendor to cover this cost, right? And that is a problem we had to tackle. It's a problem we have actually solved, and we've solved that by partnering with a partner like Flychain. And I don't know, I'm going to pause for a little bit, Ian. If you could just give us a little preview of what transition financing is going to do for not only our partnership, but also our customers.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just kind of taking a step back on Flychain, where we got our origin, we realized that there are a lot of capital cash flow issues, I should say, specifically in this space where our customers don't really have a lot of other financial options, namely like banks, don't really lend much to our customer or our universe. And so what we've done in this notion of transition financing, we've mentioned that there are often breaks in the action, some payments stop, there's new processes happening. That can be a couple weeks, 2 months, what have you. And so what we've built and the way that we can kind of finance customers is we look at your outstanding AR, and that's really what we care about. And so we're going to value that outstanding AR and then bring that money forward so you have a couple payrolls in your bank account while you're making that transition. We know those claims are out there. We know they exist. They will get paid at some point. And so what we're saying is, by partnering with the right entities, we can trust that that money is going to get repaid. Therefore, we're comfortable as you're making this switch to provide you with that capital. So that gives our customers peace of mind in the transition. And just to double back on the one point around migration timeline. So that is so critical. And if you're not feeling that level of comfort, right, and have a line of sight in a detailed plan, that 2-3 week process could be a 5-month process. And we've seen that. And so I couldn't stress enough that having a partner that tells you this is exactly the sequence of steps, here's our go live date, this is when we guarantee things are going to be up and running, that does wonders for us because now we can rely that, this is going to be back, money's going to be flowing, you're going to be able to repay as soon as possible. And that's also a great litmus test for a business, right? If you're making a decision to move there and they're kind of like flying by the seat of their pants, like I wouldn't have a lot of comfort to then hand over kind of like the heartbeat of my business to this entity. So exactly. I just talk about that and can always, as I mentioned, get more in the weeds on transition financing, but it's something that we do all day, every day, and it's been working quite well.
Yeah, and even with the best laid plans, you could plan a 4-week like for example in Therapy IQ we have our transitions usually run between 4 to 6 weeks. So best case scenario, it's 4 weeks. We're getting everything we need from the practice, and we're able to get things going. However, there are things that are always outside your control. For example, big one is insurance enrollment. So you're using a clearinghouse over here from the previous EMR. Now you're switching to Therapy IQ, and now we're enrolling your practice into a new clearinghouse. That time frame right there is about sometimes it takes about 2 weeks just to get everything completed. So we could have done everything ready to go, and you're ready for you to go live, but you're not enrolled yet, and you're not making money. And now there's that blip, and that's where Flychain comes in with the transition finance.
There's this other notion too, where as there is sort of like this transition that's happening, it can take 4 to 6 weeks. We see that to be a very good timeline, right? But there is also an onus on the business themselves, right? And so it's a lot of times we find ourselves, I imagine you do too, like we can only move as fast as the customer is giving this information. So I think it's also as you as the therapy IQ or that entity is providing all the insights on timeline, you have to be very clear that like this timeline can only exist if you are actively doing the things that are required of you, because that can get kicked down. Our customers are busy. They might not have all the time in the world to set this stuff up. So making it very clear, like this is going to require X amount of time. This is your responsibility, and laying front also then gives them a little nudge to make sure that you're swimming in the same stream.
Exactly. And that's the kind of, actually that brings me to the third point I was going to make, which is support through the adjustment period. Like, even after an organ transplant, the body takes time to adapt, to the new organ, and there's always risk of rejection, And this is what Ethan was talking about. Your team, like involve your team from the get-go, as early as possible, because that's where the rejection is going to happen, right? So if there's a problem, there's going to be a workflow wrinkle or something that they just can't overcome, or maybe you just have someone who just does not like change at all. You need support from the team that's onboarding you to mitigate even that guy who is going to give you, a headache because of the change. So similarly, staff require time to adapt to the new system. There can be resistance, just personality resistance. There could be errors such as, that cause people not to learn the system, effectively as quickly as possible. So what you really want to know is what level, everybody says they're going to support you, but what level of assistance do you receive from the prospective, vendor in the migration process, right? So you need to know that. You have to absolutely know what that is. Do they allow for custom content like creation of forms, email, SMS templates, or are you limited to out of the box content, from intake and clinical documentation? Why is that important? Because if you're limited to out of the box content, what if the out of the box content does not look like what you're using today? Guess what? Your staff will hate you for that, right? So the more we can replicate exactly what you're using today, the better, because that's a smaller adoption curve for your team. Secondly, does a vendor support customization of content, or who does that fall on, right? So even those forms, right? Okay, I want to create, we have these forms that we used to, we love these forms, and they're like, okay, here's a form builder, go build it yourself. Do you really have the capacity or the time to do it, or are they going to help you? That's huge, because you need to factor that into your decision of whether you're going to go with this vendor or that vendor. If I'm going to, here I'm going to get help. Over here, I'm not going to get help. So that's a big decision point. Third, what type of training will you receive? Does the vendor provide live training, or just give you access to a knowledge base and some tutorial videos over here? Go figure it out, right? Do you receive a dedicated implementation team to support you through the process, or is it just whoever, you're sending support tickets, or whoever shows up? Today is Jane, tomorrow is John, and you don't know who's running the process. Do you number 5? Do you receive assistance with data migration? Most of the providers we work with are not. I'm not saying that. I don't want to knock them and say they're not tech savvy, but they don't have time for technology, right? I know. Most of the clients I work with through my consulting days, they're good at what they're good at. They don't want to be good at that thing that you're good at. So they want someone who's going to take this and make sure they don't lose any data, because they're required to hold this data for 6 years, some of them 7 years. And this is a requirement by law. So they cannot lose data. So who's going to help with that process? Or do they feel confident? Do you feel confident enough that someone inside your team can do that? Because if not, you need to be asking the vendor that question. The other point is, who's going to provide, do they provide assistance with clearinghouse enrollments, right? So when you're enrolling for insurance, who's keeping track of that? Who's the quarterback for that process? Who's making sure that there's nothing fell through the cracks? You didn't miss a vendor, and now you're having to wait another 4 weeks because someone forgot to do it, right? Who's managing that process? And then from that point, and this is the most important part, more than anything else, when you're switching vendors, is because a lot of people don't, the dating phase for any relationship is always fun, right? But it's when the relationship actually, rubber meets the road, that's when things get tight. So the biggest question you want to ask is, what level of ongoing support should I expect? I have heard some really strange things in this industry. I've heard a vendor, I'm not going to name them, but they actually have something called support quotas. So the quota basically means that there's only 2 or 3 people in your practice who can send in a support ticket. That means everybody else is funneling all their problems through these 3 people. When do they get their work done? I mean, that's ridiculous. But this is actually a major vendor. We're actually winning a lot of deals from from them right now. But they're a massive vendor, and they say that you can only send support tickets to 2 or 3 people, and you can only send support a certain number of support tickets. Now, think about that. What are you really telling a healthcare provider that when they're in the middle of serving a human being, they can't ask you a question, they get stuck. They have no one to support them at all. So it is hugely important that you need to find out what level of support you're going to get, how the support is going to be delivered to you. Is it live chat? Is it screen share? Is it phone calls? What is it? You need to be completely clear on that, because that is what is going to give you peace of mind when your provider is in the middle of a telehealth session and they're remote and you have no idea what's going on and they just got stuck.
Yeah.
So that's exactly what you need in that scenario. So I'm going to pause there and see if Ethan, you have any comments or Simo?
I agree with everything that you're saying. Like it's like we always say the best offense is a good defense. And what we really mean by that is doing all of your homework so the defense is like doing your homework, doing your diligence. And then you can go into offensive mode and grow because you have a stable foundation under you. So no comment, you covered it. And I actually learned a lot.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
I just want to reassure everyone listening that we will be sending out a checklist after this. I know that we're throwing a lot of content at you. So there will be a checklist summarizing these questions that Nate is sharing, because everything here is so relevant and so important. So that will be shared. So rest assured, I know it's a lot of content, but we will be summarizing this in that checklist. Perfect. So after, talking about what questions we should ask a prospective vendor, what's interesting to ask also is, what are the questions providers should ask their current, vendor practice management system, RCM, before making the switch? And maybe I'll hand this over to Ethan to talk a little bit about what are these questions that should be asked.
Yeah, and I think that it's the opposite perspective in a lot of ways that versus what Nate was talking about. And what we mean there is you're making a switch, right? You're telling this business, like, we're not going to be working with you anymore. Well, there will be outstanding claims. So the first is like, get a pulse on exactly what's outstanding, because that's money that you're effectively owed, right? That's the first. Have a really clear understanding. And then it's who's going to support this? Is it going to be that company? Kind of referenced this earlier, but is it going to be them? Because there's that, kind of like uncomfortable area where it's like, we're leaving you, but you still have to collect on this. Some of those folks are just like, you're not a customer anymore. I don't care. And that is that's worrisome, because you could be left in the dark and just lose that money. So developing that plan of who's going to handle the outstanding AR, because that could really sink your business if that doesn't get collected. The other thing I would say is the data migration. You mentioned this before, more on the tactical migration, but like, are they okay giving you that historic data? Once again, you're telling them that we don't want to work with you anymore. They're not that incentivized to really help you anymore. And so oftentimes, like, before you make the switch, like, start asking these types of questions. Hey, how is my data captured today? And can I export all of that? Maybe do that exercise before you tell them you're leaving, right? These are the types of things that you want to insulate and protect yourself and plan for, because any little issue there can really sink your business from a cash flow standpoint or from a lack of data standpoint. So I'd say, like, those are the things that we really like to look out for. Other things like contractual obligations, key points of contact that you can actually then go back to. Once again, kind of awkward, but it's important to check those boxes so that gives you a little bit more peace of mind and say, like, look, we're leaving, but we enjoyed our time together, and you need to help us kind of make this transition.
And just to piggyback on just to add a quick comment on that, migration of data and platforms holding practices data hostage is so rampant, especially in our industry. We have competitors who will not allow a file to be migrated out in bulk. You literally have to go one by one, client by client, and export your files. Now, the sad part is this data actually belongs to the practice. It actually is owned by the practice. And the fact that you have no way to extract that data out is actually unconscionable. I don't even know how these businesses operate, restricting people from grabbing their data when they need it. So that is huge. You got to ask that question before. And if you're an EMR today, HR today that does that, you need to start having a plan. And this is why you start looking 6 to 12 months ahead of time, because you need to have a plan for what's going to happen when you scale off of that. And it's any platform. You can scale off of any platform. The goal for a business owner is to grow. And if your growth is also going to create a new problem because you now can't move your data in a system that's a cookie cutter system, then that's going to be a problem for your business.
Yeah. It's shocking to hear that even in this day and age, I mean, they make it so hard. So it's good to kind of just get everything checked before even confronting them about making a change, because at that point, they're going to completely shut their doors to you.
Exactly.
It's really navigating this carefully. I think, Ethan, also just to talk a little bit more about that financial impact upon transitioning systems, what are some practical strategies that providers can use to manage those financial implications?
Yeah, I think it's honestly not, I wouldn't call it rocket science. It's just like putting some time and thinking through this and budgeting, right? So there are always going to be disruptions. This is usually like a singular disruption when you're transitioning, but we also see disruptions where insurance just takes long to, pay, et cetera. So budgeting. Do you have 3 payrolls in your bank account, which is like what we typically recommend just for, kind of a healthy business. So budgeting and understanding that kind of cash flow forecasting and planning, what kind of cash flow break can I actually digest, right? So these are the kind of things. And if you maybe don't have those 3 payrolls, like there's access to credit that we provide. So it's really just an understanding of where am I at today? What is my financial situation today? And how might that change or, get a little rocky in the next couple of months, and then just developing that plan. So I think it's really just around like setting up the capital, budgeting, and having a line of sight into all of the different things that could potentially go wrong, and having a little bit of a buffer, either in the form of a cash balance or access to fairly priced working capital. And once again, that transition financing, which we alluded to earlier, is a kind of a great option for that at this stage.
Totally. And it's also the idea of, maybe don't hire that additional staff just before you're about to change systems. It's all those just practical things, lay it all out, assess all the upcoming milestones, budget for everything, have that like cash reserve, a line of credit, do your forecasts before you make such a big switch.
We always say, like, think about running a business as like under Murphy's Law, like everything that possibly can go wrong will go wrong at some point in time. And so once again, it's that offense is really requiring a good defense, and that's all the planning and things. And it's honestly daunting, right? Like planning and stuff is the pain in the butt and everything, but we just see it so necessary, because the folks that don't do that will find themselves in problematic scenarios down the line, bad patient outcomes, lack of money, and then you
losing staff. Exactly.
And so it's just planning, and that's what we're here for sure.
I mean that's spot on. If we don't plan ahead, we will fail. We're planning to fail. Yep. That's literally it.
Yeah, perfect. And I know we talked about the transition financing program. I don't know, Nate, if there's anything else you wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, no, actually I do. So for us, the way we're seeing the transition financing program, we're actually seeing it as more than just a transition, right? So if you think about it, like Ethan just mentioned about, having a rainy day fund, a line of credit, just in case, right? Usually in business, we say whatever plans you have, they're going to cost twice as much as you think, and they're going to take twice as long as you think, right? So planning ahead, if that doesn't happen, that's best case scenario. But usually that's what you want to plan ahead for. So for us, we've seen disruptions even midstream with clients who are already on a platform, right? So like early last year, we had that massive clearinghouse hack, which fortunately was not, Change Healthcare, which fortunately we were not affected at all. But those practices got impacted. Most of these practices, they don't have a line of credit that's already sitting there waiting. So most of them got some funding from Change, and then all of a sudden they were required to pay it, and most of them went out of business.
Yeah.
So that's what we're talking about here. Planning ahead is huge. So for us, we are planning to offer this financing transition financing from Flychain even to our existing customers. Because having a line of credit in your back pocket is always a good thing to have, because you never know what tomorrow is going to hold. And as a business owner, you want to control as much as you can control, because you won't be able to control most of it. So, but this is something you can actually control. So the partnership with Flychain for us was super high value. In fact, I'm still super excited, even though we finalized the partnership a few months ago. I'm still super excited about this because of what I think is going to bring to not only our new users coming onto Therapy IQ, the prospects coming onto Therapy IQ, but also existing users, existing customers today. So yeah, that's why I'm still super excited about this.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, likewise. Okay, perfect. I think we're just wrapping up now. I think just a final thing, I guess key takeaways, and how do Therapy IQ and Flychain work together to support providers through system transition? So we'd just like to know a little bit about how, Therapy IQ is currently doing this, and how then, with Flychain's, bookkeeping systems, capital, access, analysis, etc., how we can work together to really support providers.
Right. Great question. So again, back to the organ transplant analogy. If you're looking to have to do an organ transplant and you're shopping for a specialist, you want a specialist who has experience. So, the collective experience inside Therapy IQ, even though we're a young company, we have over 100 years of collective experience, from the sales team all the way to onboarding and implementation. Most of us have worked together for years on different projects, even from the consulting projects. So we are experts at what we do. We know the first thing we had to do is build a platform that does what we're saying it's going to do, and then it's a question of helping these providers move over. So how do we help with that? We consider ourselves operational transition experts, right? Because of the level of support that we provide. So, for example, we provide tailored onboarding and data migration support. We provide adaptable workflows and real-time reporting, and we actually are able to configure those for you while you're onboarding into the platform. We provide live training, of course. We provide ongoing support, of course, live chat, email, screen share, phone, whatever the practice needs. We don't ever want to see anybody stuck when they're in the middle of serving another human being. Patient communication, continuity of care while you're transitioning. We want to make sure you're transitioning from, if you're using a patient portal somewhere else, you're transitioning to Therapy IQ, which has an inbuilt patient portal. So we want to make sure that migration, even for your clients, is seamless and easy, right? So that when they're moving over, they're able to continue to receive the care that they need. And then, of course, we have scalable solutions, solutions for growth. So, for example, we think about your business the way you think about it, like a business, right? So we have a feature, for example, called Waitlist IQ. Waitlist IQ helps you manage your leads right from your website, drop them, triage them on your website, drop them onto a waitlist on Therapy IQ, and then you can move them on into clients and all the way to discharge. So we are a platform that actually thinks about your business from your own client journey's perspective. So we look at from when they meet you on your website all the way to when you discharge them successfully, hopefully. And because that's our goal, it's a shared goal that we have with the providers as well. And in the meantime, of course, our bottom line is to make sure your bottom line is as large as possible.
Yeah, I love that. And just to kind of tie a bow on everything is, we've got Therapy IQ, which is above kind of this line, as we like to say, where it's like practice management, RCM, clinical workflows. And for us, we sit below that line. We're finance, accounting, lending, banking, valuation, savings. But it is imperative that we partner with the right folks, because we need to get a version of this data and that data interoperability, so we can pull things and map your payroll expenses against billing data to understand profitability and things. And so it's really cool to see, when our companies come together, this handshake of data all swimming in the same stream with the same goals of improving the bottom line for the practice and making things more efficient, easier, less time intensive. Like, that's why this marriage of kind of EMR, practice management, billing, and Flychain tends to work really well. And it then enables us to do these cool things like lending and advancing payment on claims we couldn't do that without a partner like you because we wouldn't know what their claims are or could rely on them. So it's been cool, and we're excited to really kick this off in 2025. So really appreciative of your time, Nate, and thanks. Like I said, I learned a lot, and I'm sure the audience did as well. And we're going to follow up with that checklist, and it's kind of a summary of all of the questions that we've addressed here today, and making sure that as you make these decisions, you're not making any missteps and you're going through the right process so that you're giving yourselves the best chance of success in perpetuity.
Perfect. Yeah. And look, in closing, for myself as well, guys, thank you so much for your time, for hosting this, for having me on.
Yeah.
I always love to have these conversations. I'm very passionate about providers succeeding in their business. So, and this is why this partnership is important. And these conversations, and I'm really looking forward to having more and more of these. I'm definitely open to having more of these.
Oh yeah. We'll get it on the books in the near future, and with that, I think we're good, and appreciate
Perfect.
your time, Simone. Thanks for kind of hosting and moderating.
Yes, Simone. Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Cool.
Take care.
Hey, everybody.
Bye. Thanks for tuning in to the Flychain Reaction. If you'd like to keep the conversation going, feel free to contact us at info@flychain.us or schedule a demo through our website at www.flychain.us. See you next time!